Here's what's coming up on episode 122 of the Big Seance Podcast. Renata Daniel and Anne Rzechowicz.
There's so many people out there who are so serious about their information. And we decided, well, Renata actually came up with the concept that, let's have a bit of fun.
The whole paranormal thing is really blooming in Australia and it's beautiful. It's really great to see.
Tell us about table tipping. How's that work?
One of my most profound things through the spirit box up at Kew Station was this British voice saying to me, they're not supposed to hear us. And another female responding, silence.
Shut up.
We'll say it with an American accent. The Paranormal Party podcast.
Oh, your hick is lovely. I love it.
Welcome to the Big Seance Podcast. I'm Patrick Keller of BigSeance.com, and this is a place for an open discussion on all things paranormal, but specifically topics like ghosts and hauntings, paranormal research, spirit communication, psychics and mediums, and life after death. So basically, anything that pops up in my paranormal world. The candles are already lit, so you might as well come on in and join the seance.
In the past, you've probably heard that when I refer to previous episodes, I always mention the date of the episode along with the episode number. It always seems tedious, but it was the best way for me to accurately direct you to a past episode, even though there have always been direct links in the show notes. The search box, by the way, at bigseance.com works pretty well too. Well, I am super excited to share that thanks to the support of my very first patron Paranerds on Patreon, I've felt comfortable investing in the upgrade needed on my website to make it way easier to direct people to old episodes. You can now simply type bigseance.com/122, for example, if you're listening to this from the future and wanted to get back to the episode or see the show notes. And it works for any episode. Just go to bigseance.com/ and then type the number of the episode. So now when I mention old episodes, it'll be easier for both of us. But again, this is all due to the support of my brand new Patreon supporters. So if you're curious about that, visit patreon.com/Big Seance or click the link in the show notes. But do stick around to the end of the episode where I shout out to my supporters at the level of Super Paranerd and Parlor guest. Now, let's get to today's show. Renata Daniel and Anne Rzechowicz are prominent members of the paranormal community in Newcastle, New South Wales, in Australia. I'm pretty sure we owe our friend Susan Davey for connecting us. She's also the Paranerd who connected us to Mitchell Coombs, by the way. Thank you, Susan. But Renata and Anne have recently done something so very cool, which happened shortly after we recorded the interview you're about to hear, and I thought it was very important for you to hear about it. Close to the beginning of the interview, you'll hear a brief mention of the upcoming Paracon Australia. Anne and Renata were very excited to be doing things like speaking and leading ghost tours and things like that for the event. Well, just days before, the director of Paracon had to unexpectedly cancel the weekend event. Here's the cool part, though. Renata and Anne, along with a woman named Pete Banks, who runs APPI Ghost Hunts and Tours, put their minds together. They put blood, sweat, and their own money into coming up with alternative plans and pulling the community together for a great weekend, and all at the last minute. This included finding facilities, a location for ghost hunts, activities, and even hosting and entertaining Bill Chappell, who I think had already flown in for Paracon from the US when it was canceled. And it was a big success. I enjoyed following along and seeing videos from the weekend, but I know that these ladies deserve a few days off and maybe a long, quiet bubble bath. Renata and Anne, you rock. Anne and Renata, how are you?
Excellent.
G'day. How are you?
Good day, Cobber.
So excited to talk to some people hanging out in the middle of winter from summer.
Well, yeah, we're freezing our little tushies off over here.
Oh, hardly.
Oh, yeah, I know.
It's hardly winter,
Well,
honestly.
if we said it was 11 degrees, that sounds really cold for you guys.
It does. And actually, I looked it up earlier. You don't make fun of me, but I said, what is the temperature in Sydney? Because I knew you guys were near Sydney. And it said like 57 for Fahrenheit or something. And I was like, gosh, that's perfect for me. I can dig that. Because this fat man does not do warm weather. So that would be nice all year round.
Yeah, no, we don't like summer. Summer here, it gets to, well, it's like 41, 42, which is who knows what in whatever that word was you said.
It's 1,000 degrees centigrade.
1100 something.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I am just so excited to do this. And I have to tell everybody, if you're not aware of or familiar with these two nerds, it's going to be a fun roller coaster today because they are hilarious.
It's going to be a baptism.
Oh boy, I didn't see that on the notes, but that'll work.
Oh dear.
These are perfect paranerds. Anne Rzechowicz is who did I do it well?
You did good.
Nice, thank you. Don't ask me to spell it. I'd have to look at it. But Anne is the investigator and owner of Oz Paratech, and the website is ozparatech.com. And she's a paranormal investigator and tour guide at Q Station Manly. And she's a professional actor. You can check out some YouTubes of some fabulous performances. And she's also a musician. And so my musician heart loves that. She's a music and humor specialist at an aged care facility. And her and Renata work together quite a bit. And Renata is the owner of Newcastle Ghost Tours, and her site is newcastleghosttours.com.au. She's a psychic. She's a Reiki practitioner. She's a total tarot nerd. And she is an individual couples and family counselor. She's also an author. So there you go. I mean, we could have 16 episodes just on all of those things in your bios. How long have you two known each other?
Well, that's actually, no, we haven't actually buddied up that long ago. A couple of years, maybe 3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
We've known of each other in the field for quite some time. And interestingly enough, I thought she was a real cow. I thought I heard all these things about this Renata person who was an absolute cow.
And I am, actually.
Oh, I know, right? So then I actually got to know her and found out that she's just as crazy as me. So it was, I'm glad I don't listen to other people. I make up my own mind.
So were you like, I wouldn't say competitors before, but because you're both kind of in the same kind of thing. So it was a competitive situation.
Yeah. I was with another team. You know how it is. You go through various team stages in your growth development. And the other person would be saying, oh, look at her. She's got all the sites in Newcastle. It's not fair. And I used to say, maybe she's done a lot of work to get those sites. Maybe she's earned them. And it's not right to say that. And then when I actually got to meet her, I found out how much hard work she does put into getting these sites and maintaining these sites. She leaves me for dead.
Thank you.
Oh, now you've got to say something nice about me.
We've got an appreciative moment happening.
Come on, say something nice about Anne now.
Oh, hold on. I've got to think about it for a minute. Hold on.
No, this is live, Renata. We can't be stopping and thinking. This should be rolling off your tongue.
Well, while you're thinking about that, Renata, I don't want my little bio that I just read to be my introduction for you all. I want you to be able to kind of introduce yourselves and kind of tell us what you do, especially since probably the majority of the listeners are from the US and are probably not familiar with your work. But you guys have some cool things going on, really, truly cool things going on. And I can't wait to learn about paranormal happenings in Australia. You know, before we talk about all that nerdy stuff, do a much better job of telling us what each one of you do as paranerds.
Well, I'll start off. I got into this business probably about 10 years ago. And it really started because I attended a ghost tour at one of the sites here in Newcastle. And the ghost tour was led by a lovely lady, but she was not local. She was from Sydney. And as I was standing there in the theatre, because it was in the theatre, a little voice in my head, or maybe a little voice next to me, was saying, "Why don't you do this? You should be doing this. How come someone that isn't local is taking a ghost tour through our theatre?" So I kind of walked away feeling quite compelled to actually do something about that. And it took me another year or two sort of to get my head around how you run a ghost tour and what is associated with doing all of that. I went to see a lovely husband and wife couple in Sydney who have been running, or who had run, they have since sold the business, the Rocks Ghost Tour. And the Rocks is a very, very historical place in Sydney, and they did very, very well. So I went to see the people that I thought were probably the most experienced in the area, and I sat down with them, and they were lovely in the amount of information that they could give me. And they really started me off and said, "No, go ahead, you can do this." I took a bit of time to research what I wanted to do first. And the first thing that I created was a walking tour of the oldest part of Newcastle. And Newcastle is the second oldest settlement in Australia on the mainland. It was started in 1804. So we do have a little bit of convict history and colonial history behind us. And that was really the first tour that I started off with. And from there, I have built up over the last 8 or 9 years to having about 7 different sites that we work with now. In between all of that, I've been through quite a number of volunteers and prospective tour guides that just really haven't worked from the point of view of not being, or not wanting to learn the information, or not being available, or not being at the same sort of level family-wise and age-wise as I am. And finally, Anne kind of came into the scenario via a cruise that I had organised. Now, the difficulty with cruising, and I love organising cruises, is that I can't get on a cruise ship because I get awfully seasick. So I had to have somebody take my place. And Anne and her fellow paranormal investigator at that point in time said that they were going to do it for me, which was great. And so our sort of relationship started from there. Now, from that point, we've kind of done a whole lot of different things. Anne helps me out a lot on my tours. I do a little bit of help on Anne's tours. We run the Seance Parlor here in Newcastle, and we do private seances here at Anne's home in her Seance Parlor, in her seance room. And we do workshops, and we run the Paranormal Party podcast.
Which is not a podcast, it's a vodcast, but that's okay.
Podcast doesn't sound good. Podcast does.
It was basically, we didn't really know what a proper podcast was, apart from the fact we listened to them all the time. And we thought we'd just call it a podcast, and someone went, "No, that's a vodcast." I went, "Oh, okay. We're not changing the name."
And I have to tell you, I've watched 2 or 3 of those, and they are very worth your time for, if for nothing else, the humor and the hilariousness, and if that's a word, but also for
like
our
call it shenanigans.
Yes.
Yeah.
For our American listeners, Renata, say the name of your vodcast again.
The Paranormal Party Podcast.
Not potty.
Yes. Now, I know a lot of you think that she's talking about, something that you do as you're laughing really hard, but it's a party. And so it took me a while.
I said that.
We'll say it with an American accent. The Paranormal Party
Podcast.
Oh, your hick is lovely. I love it. But no, you should check it out, and I'll put links and stuff in the show notes. It's a good time.
A good one.
It is good fun. That's the Paranormal Party podcast, or potty podcast. How was that?
And just so the listeners know, it is meant to be funny, but with some knowledge in there. There's so many people out there who are so serious about their information. And we decided, well, Renata actually came up with the concept that, let's have a bit of fun. She did a tarot card reading, and I did a cyanide and whatever it was, the cyanide and cards.
Uh-huh.
I did readings using those, which was a bit unfortunate with some of the cards I picked. Needless to say, they were blocked. We won't go. You'll be bleeping.
I would be bleeping. I'm a bleeper. I'm excited to. One thing that was on my notes is so pumped to talk about this seance parlor thing and these seance evenings that you ladies have. But before that, Anne, I think it is your turn to tell us about everything that you do in the Paranerd world.
Oh, in the Paranerd. Okay. Well, coming up shortly, I am actually involved in Paracon, the Paranormal Convention in Australia. I am the MC for the convention, and I'm also presenting a topic on the hidden nooks and crannies of Q Station, where I've been an investigator there for 4 years, and we run the Paranormal Investigator Experience, which is a 4-hour experience of investigating, not telling stories about ghosts, but actually teaching people how to investigate. And we review their evidence. We review their stuff, and they get to see what they've caught, if they've caught anything. So that's what's coming up immediately in my future. I started off probably having an interest throughout, from the early childhood right through teenage years, and even when the kids were like playing with Ouija boards under the stairs, I'd be going, but what if I've got abilities, or you've got abilities, and you open doors and you let things through and demons will be out everywhere. So that interest followed me through. I used to read ghost stories, and then I saw a TV show with gadgets. And I went, oh, we can have things, lights that flash and buzzers that go off to let you know there's a ghost around. Because I'd look at these psychics who are going, oh, I can sense a ghost over there. They've got a hat on and a long white frock. And I'd be going, well, that's nice for you. I can't see or feel anything. But if I had a gadget with a light that flashed, that was exciting. So I started to look at the gadgets. I started to learn more, then eventually joined a team. I got involved in some local tours around Newcastle, which is where Renata became my competitor. And then I got to one of the paranormal conventions, and we realised that there was 1 or 2 places in Australia selling paranormal equipment, but they'd either died in the arse, had lost the wind in their sails, or just weren't. They were providing homemade equipment that was crappy. So my husband approached Sean from Ghost Stop and said, could we resell your gear? And from there, it just took off. So that only happened 18 months ago. Now, I've been investigating as a paranormal investigator for 8 years, but the Oz Paratech only kicked off 18 months ago, and we're floored at the success that it's had. So that, I think, now, apart from that, I'm doing the Q Station, Prince Henry Hospital investigations. I help Renata out. I'm the gadget girl. I've got all the things that need batteries, everything. And then
she also takes some of them on investigations.
Yes. And I would like to say my biggest brag is I brought back table tipping to Australia. Now,
yes, she did. Yes, she did.
Yes, it hadn't. Nobody was using it that I am aware of. I started to learn about it with a little group, and I should say I wanted to learn about it. I researched it. I brought it in, and we started working with it, and the results were profound. And then eventually when I transferred over to Renata, working with her, we have a group that meets once a week, and we work on it every week. We've had a couple of weeks off due to illness, but yeah, we work on it every week for 2 hours with our table tipping and our spiritual development.
So a development circle, basically.
Yeah.
Awesome. You two have, in everything you do, you have your hand in something paranormal, and I am so jealous of that's just what you guys have going on, and there's so many cool things every week. Like how your calendars must be crazy.
Yes, they are.
We're exhausted, but we're the happiest exhausted you could ever be because we're investigating so much and doing so many things. We are blissfully happy and exhausted.
Now, the first thing I'd like to talk about is that I'm excited to see the differences between paranormal culture from the U.S. point of view and Australia. And to me, I've always talked about this, paranormal craze that started I lose track of time, but probably at this point, like around 15 years ago. And that's when, the shows came out and all the paranormal teams, and all of a sudden everybody is a Ghostbuster, and it's a little cooler to talk about paranormal things. Is the time, was there kind of a paranormal craze at about the same time in Australia, or is it just as cool as the US now? And when did that come back, I guess? Because it comes and goes in waves, I think.
We actually had people like Sir Arthur Conan Doyle come out to Australia, and he was actually in Newcastle.
Only last week.
Yeah, we conjured him on the table.
Oh, hang on. No, I think I'm talking about the wrong one. Yeah, sorry, go on.
But yeah, so when the spiritualist movement was alive and well, a lot of those really important people were coming out to Australia and introducing Australians to all the ghostly culture. And it was actually very, very normal to see in newspapers ghost stories that were real. So people were having ghostly experiences. And if there wasn't an experience to talk about, they would print up stories from England that people had created. And so there was always this ghostly culture sitting in the background here in Australia. Then when the world wars came around, between about the 50s or the 70s, a lot wasn't happening. We did have a few groups that were still sort of involved in it, and you've got a few people around still that will say that their history dates back to around 20-odd years here in Australia with ghost hunting and paranormal investigations. Of course, there were no gadgets really to talk of back then. But, yeah, I would say you're pretty well right. Around 10 years ago, it just took off like crazy. Now, in saying that, a lot of the capital cities are very much into the whole ghost hunting craze and talk about it a little bit more normally, if you could say. Beyond that, Australia can be quite conservative still, and we still have a lot of places. And Newcastle can probably sit on the edge of that conservatism, where there are a lot of people who still look at you as if you've got 3 eyes and 2 horns growing out of your head if you start talking about ghosts and the paranormal.
And would that also mean the skeptic community too? Is that where you're going with that conservative stuff?
Yeah, there's a bit of skepticism, but there is a little bit of a religious thing also.
Oh, okay. I see.
Religiously, Australia is still very conservative. And so sometimes the belief of us crossing too many invisible lines is something that comes up. So one of our issues is actually getting sites or being able to be allowed on sites, because it can be offensive to people.
Yeah, they don't. Some people don't want their houses or venues to be known as haunted. They can't see that there is a way for them to actually make a little bit of money by renting out their property to bring guests in, make them aware of the beautiful historic location they may have. They'd rather not to be known that they've got a ghost. They find it a bit embarrassing and awkward and don't want to have that stigma attached to them. Whereas I know, because I've been to America to some of the conventions and things, that every town has their haunted house and you can pay you $2 to go in and have a look. And it's so much better accepted in your part of the world.
Well, and that's kind of the bonus here. You know, I haven't been to Australia and you've been to the US, and so you can better compare, you know, the cultures over there. Now, do you have people in Australia, you know, I guess it seems to me it doesn't happen as much anymore, but the paranormal teams used to be all about helping people who reached out to them with concerns or issues with activity in their homes and things like that. Is that happen much?
Yes. This is Pandora's box you're going to.
Oh,
we're digging into the portals of hell here, Patrick.
Because there's many people who have done their weekend demonology course and they're out there telling people that they've got demons in their home.
Yeah, they're dead and they have to go to the light. You're dead, love, and you got to go to the light.
I wish you guys could see this. Oh.
And there could be issues. And if you pay me $150, I'll get rid of whichever ghost you want me to. And then, of course...
and give you the winning lotto numbers.
I'd have to say there's you'll find some of that here. Yeah.
Yeah. Ego is a problem. Too many people have watched lots of TV shows and think they know how to go and help people in a home. They're not doing any further research or reading. They're not looking at parapsychology. They're just looking at their K2 and certain TV hosts going, oh, it's a demon, and emulating that. They're just copying it and going into people's homes and terrifying them. And then they walk out and they leave those people there on their own with thinking they've got a demon in their house.
I just know people are listening to this right now shouting, amen, amen, sister. They totally are with you right now. I've had that conversation many times.
Yeah, and that's why I think that a counselling background, as far as I'm concerned, has been such a great bonus, because I go in and I try to understand what's going on for them from that point of view. You know, what has been the disruption? Where are they at mentally? What is happening within the house to make all of these things start to create havoc? You know, is it something that's paranormal? Are they feeding it in some way? Can something be done just to settle these people down, to find that then all of these things start to calm down? Can we talk about it in some logical way? So often we go in and we fix things that have been screwed up or started up by other people, often from their best intentions. But, you know, we find that often people won't even talk to us because they've had one bad experience with somebody else. And so they say, no, I don't want any help. Thank you very much. I will just have to deal with it, or I'll call the local priest in, who is terrified himself or herself, and leaves them little better off. And so in many cases, you know, by the time we come in, it can be a real disastrous situation.
Besides being able to help people, those investigators and researchers who can, the other really cool thing that has come out of this craze is benefiting locations that have a history and being able to kind of support them and keep them around and keep the story alive. And so that's what I want to talk about next. I want to talk about what, and so many of these places you guys are involved in, I'm sure, but what are the hottest paranormal tickets in Australia?
Well, probably very close by with Anne and myself. I run tours at Maitland Jail, and Maitland Jail is the oldest established jail in Australia. It started in 1848 and ran for 150 years until it closed about 20 years ago. So that is probably known as one of the most haunted sites in the area that we live in locally.
I saw my first full apparition there only a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
And I've been in the field for 8 years, and that's my first apparition, and they were as solid as you and me, and it still mucks around with my mind, and I'm still trying to logically explain it.
Wow.
And interestingly enough, people tend to think that that's the only place that you can see ghosts in the area, which just kind of does my head in. You think, well, they must all just congregate there and nowhere else. But we all know that ghosts are everywhere. Anne obviously does Q Station Manly, which in Sydney is probably one of the hottest sites that you can possibly visit. It is an old quarantine station. And, of course, people would come out to Australia on ships, and they would often be quarantined if there was an outbreak of smallpox or some disease on a vessel. The vessel would be forced to wait in the harbour while doctors and nurses from the quarantine station went out and helped those on board. Often the whole vessel would have to be quarantined, and so all of the people on board the ship would be taken off to the Q Station, and then they would be washed in showers with carbolic acid, and their clothing would be put into these big
autoclaves,
yep. And then they would have to stay in buildings around the quarantine station itself until that particular virus was...
So they're in quarantine for 45 days. And if anyone on their ship came down with any sort of disease on the 44th day, then the whole quarantine would start for another 45 days.
Wow.
So it's an interesting location. Many people died of horrendous diseases. They had hopes of a new life in Sydney and never got there. Families were separated. Parents died. Children survived, vice versa. It's a beautiful place now.
I was just gonna say, for a place that has such a horrid history, it is a beautiful spot.
It's
beautiful.
And I find it a place of healing now. But just going back to what you were talking about is helping these locations, I'm also very much believing in helping the entities, the spirits that are stuck there as well and want to get their story across. So this is an opportunity at Q Station for them to get their story across as well.
So, of course, there are other sites in Australia that are known to be very, very haunted. We have a homestead at a place called Junee in New South Wales called Monte Cristo that is supposed to be the most haunted house in Australia. Of course, we have Port Arthur in Tasmania that was also a colonial outpost and quite a horrific spot for convicts, and that is very, very haunted. Lots of spots in Melbourne. Melbourne was never really a convict stronghold. It was at one stage, Melbourne was the most wealthy city in the whole world, especially during the gold rush. And they have lots of haunted sites, lots of haunted jails. Up the north coast, Queensland, South Australia, we have a lovely friend down there, Alison Oborn, who runs Haunted Horizons, who has won multiple awards for some of the sites that she runs in South Australia.
So has she. She's won multiple awards as well, I'm just telling you.
And Western Australia also has some fabulous sites. So the whole paranormal thing is really blooming in Australia, and it's beautiful. It's really great to see.
Also, Parramatta Jail, API, that's Australian Paranormal Phenomena Investigators. They run a series of tours, and the Parramatta Jail, Berrima Courthouse, Liverpool TAFE, which used to be an insane asylum. Where else do they run? They've got a few. They've got loads, and they've been having some good experiences. But the Parramatta Jail one's quite insane. I've been there and seen several people jumped, as I like to call it. We don't have as much history as sort of like European continents and America. We only go back a short while in the European history, and then we have our Aboriginal history. which is another whole different topic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I really, really want to talk about these seance events because, oh my gosh, if there's anything that you can't see much of my parlor here as I record, but in a perfect world, I would completely build inside this newer home a, completely to scale and historically accurate parlor. And I would have, it would look like a seance parlor.
Yes.
I love every second of just thinking about that. Tell us about your seance evenings, because that is so cool.
Well, we sort of, it kicked off from our investigations because we used to do a bit of table tipping and glass dowsing in our part of our investigations. And we were finding that we weren't getting messages from spirits at the location. We were getting loved ones that were coming through and trying to give messages. And there just wasn't enough time to give them the opportunity to speak. And that's what I was saying before. We're trying to help spirit as well, not just us earthbound people. So I'd sort of talked about it, but Renata is the one who put it into action. So you can tell them all about it.
Look, it was another aspect of what we do that we're fascinated and passionate about. And it was just another opportunity to have another night because, you just can't have enough of this stuff. And invite the public to experience the whole seance thing. I did a talk about 2 years ago at Paracon, which was about the beginnings of spiritualism and how the whole thing started and has progressed in the paranormal field. And a lot of my talk was about what was happening in the early years with the Fox sisters and mesmerism and how the growth of women's power started to come through when they became the mediums that we used in the early 1800s. And it started to be this fascinating journey of, well, maybe we can experience some of that and get the people that come on our tours to have that personal experience and have that control within a situation where they are asking the questions of their loved ones, and they can get some sort of a physical experience of it, because of course table tipping and glass dowsing is very experiential. They're not just sitting there in a corner with a medium shouting at them with regard to what their loved ones might be saying. These people are totally immersed in the whole experience. They have their hands on the table, they have their hands on the glass, and they feel that they are being directed by their loved ones in that experience. And so we can ask yes and no. We can ask who this is. We can get them to actually spell their names on the table by using the glass. And then we get information coming through for these particular people that are at the table that only these people know, and sometimes they don't even know. So we've had experiences where we're not quite sure who is going to come through. Whoever is the strongest energy is the one. I have to
tell you, every time we do one of these, I'm in sheer terror that nothing will happen. Because I'm the paranormal investigator and a bit of a skeptic, but I've had too many experiences with it now that I know it's real. And we've had skeptics come in as well. Their other halves drag them along. And there was one beautiful night where the glass slid towards this man who was our big skeptic for the evening. And we've gone, okay, it's a message for you. Are you female? Indicated yes. Are you a grandparent on the mother's side? Indicated yes. Said, okay, can you spell out the first letter of your name? And he's like, yeah, right, whatever. And it did a big M. And we said, is it M? And he went, yes. Oh, wow, is it? Cool, okay. And then we eventually got it out that it was Mary. Then we went on, and he obviously had a little bit of a mind blowout on this, and he waited a little bit, and he's gone, okay, get her to give me the first letter of her last name. We go, okay, can you do that? And the glass indicated yes. And sure enough, I can't remember what it was, like a W or something like that. It spelt that out. And we've gone, is it a W? And he went, yes. And his wife has cracked up laughing, going, see, they can't get that off bloody Facebook.
Oh.
You'd obviously come in and said, they've probably researched all of us on Facebook before we've come in, so they know all the answers.
With all of your extra time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, so that was good. I liked having a good mind blowing on someone.
That's cool. I'm sure to see it crack, and them open up. Now, Renata, I have a question because I've been to some seances, and I like to think anytime I'm doing any kind of spirit communication experiments, usually by myself, sometimes with other peeps, very, very seldom have I experienced any physical phenomena. The physical things that are happening at these seances, is it because you are there, the psychic?
Oh, I'd like to think so. It's all about me.
No, it's about me.
Oh, shut up, it's about me. Look, I really do think that there in all of this is a human aspect involved. There is some kind of link between us and them. It's like this thing about, if a tree falls in the forest, are you likely to know? So to me, it is a connection between us and that world that is still viable. And we bring whoever it is through, whether it is because of the memories that we have stored within our heads, whether it is that connection with the residual energy that is left behind on this earth, and the two sort of interweave and interconnect, and the medium is the one that makes sense of it all. I don't know. It's a complete mystery to me. All I know is that for some odd and weird reason, these things happen. And when it does, it is absolute magic. And the way people react and the healing that occurs is just profound. And we keep on walking away every night going, we are just so blessed to be able to be involved in this.
That is so very cool. So very cool. And Anne, I want you to have a chance to tell us about I've never table tipped. I've seen videos of table tipping.
Oh, you need to come to Australia and table tip with us.
Well, I think I saw a video of you table tipping. I don't remember who shared it with me. It may have been our buddy Susan. She may have sent something to me. Susan's awesome. Hi, Susan.
Hi, Susan.
But tell us about table tipping. How's that work?
Basically, we have a small, what they call a wine table. I use a 3-legged wooden table. I like it to be on wooden floors, but it doesn't have to be. Everybody places their hands lightly on the table. I always say, as like you're about to start playing the piano, you're making contact with the table, but you're not weighting the table. So you're not dropping your wrist down and being lazy and leaning on it. We then ask spirit to come forward and make their presence known by moving the table or twisting the table, tipping the table, knocking on the table. And generally you start to feel like a pulsing come through the table. It's almost like a heartbeat as the energy builds. Then you start to hear little clicks as the feet of the table seem to come loose from the floor, and then the table will just gently tip over to a side and then come back down. And like we encourage people to try and mimic as if somebody's faking it to get them to do it. And you can't make these movements happen. But as Renata pointed out the other week, it's what fascinates me the most is I think most people could fake the table tipping over, but coming back in such a controlled way it's really, I don't know how anyone could do that, particularly with other people on the table. So we've had it tip, we've had it rotate, we've had it only on 4 occasions now, we've had it levitate. Now I've been doing this for about 6 years, and I've been working with Renata and her husband and my husband for the last 2 years, and the table came up off the floor gently, did a figure 8 in the air, and then gently came back down to the ground, and Renata and I were squealing like little girls in sheer delight. But I think you've got to be on the table with people you trust, people that aren't there for ego to go, oh, it always tips when I'm on the table. That's a red herring to me. As soon as I hear that, that's ego. We have sat there some nights when nothing has happened, and that's what's meant to happen that night.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. How many people do you usually have at the table?
My little table's 4 to 5. I would like to work up to bigger tables, but it's just finding the space to actually have that in my house. As my daughter and son-in-law-to-be and grandchild move back into the house this weekend. Oh.
You might have some tables tipping in a different way.
Yeah. But we've also had loved ones come through that spell out the name. So we'll say to them, can you tip it? And we'll count through the alphabet. Stop when you get to the first letter of your name. And it will go right through to, like, say, D. And we'll say, oh, is it D? Yes. Okay, next letter. And it's a slow process, but we get there.
I'm not sure if, any of the spiritualist camps here in the U.S. do much table tipping anymore, but it seems to me like Skeptics would have a field day on that.
Oh, totally.
How do you discuss or debate that with Skeptics? Or maybe you don't.
Well, when I'm table tipping, I try to get it going for people and then I stand back. Or I let it show that my hands are sliding on the table and not fixed in a position. But when I get up and walk away from the table and there's none of us on the table, it's just guests, they are sort of going, it's still moving. And we've had people question it. They've said, oh, we think it's you moving the table. I said, fine, okay, we'll step back. And it still worked for them, and they've been quite shocked. But, yes, there's the whole talk about the idiomatic
motor movements.
Where you sync up and that is what makes the table tip, or that you're all hoping it will be a certain letter or something. So you're all
same with the Ouija board and the pendulum and all of that.
Exactly. So, I mean, it could be. It could be those things. We don't know, but the accuracy of some of the information we are getting is what makes me go, it's right? Really? We were right? I question every time something's right. I'm still going in awe. We got that right?
Yeah. And
it all fills in with confidence, but
and even if it is all idiomotor stuff, I mean, freaking cool. Even if it is, I mean, you still can't explain it.
Yeah.
That's right. It's a wonderful form of power and control that we have that we're still learning how to use.
And seeing the healing that comes from it, it's magic. People who have had loved ones who have been murdered or committed suicide, or friends at work that have committed suicides. We get so many suicide people come through who want to let family members know they're okay. And it might be a friend of a friend that's trying to get the message across. So, it's a beautiful thing.
And give us a couple of your current favorite gadgets or toys right now in the paranormal field.
We've actually got this little bit of an experiment thing happening where we've got, the multiple ports that you plug headphones into so you can all listen to the one thing at the same time. We're doing that. So we've got people, say 4 people with headphones on, listening to a spirit box. So they just hear the spirit box churning through, and the idea is they've just got to yell out anything they hear. The rest of us are standing around with our backs to them, asking questions in the location. So the people on the headphones can't hear what's being asked, and we're trying to see if there's some sort of logical responses coming from the people on the headphones who can't hear us. Because you know what it's like. You front load information. If you say, what was your crime? Well, you're all going to be listening for certain words. Right. You might miss something else. So we've been doing this at several locations, and it's been amazing, hasn't it?
No, we've had whole conversations. There's a small place outside of Newcastle called Stroud that's about an hour's drive away. And this was our first tour out there, investigation night. And we had a young lady who had ancestors who had come through to Stroud as convicts. And as we started this little experiment with the SB11 and the headphones, she started to hear words that were associated with her family members. And she started to freak out because she's saying, oh, my God, they're talking about me. They're talking about me. They're talking about my ancestors. And she was shaking. And
she was hyperventilating by the end of it.
I went over and I was trying to calm her down, and she's saying everything that they are saying. And we had a lady making a list of words, and out of 20 words, literally 18 of them connected to this particular woman. Now, I know that we could say, or she could say, that she was imagining that these words were connected to her, but they were names, they were dates, they were specific jobs, occupations that the family had.
And his crime as
his crime as a convict. All of these things that just added up to this story. And she was just absolutely beside herself. She couldn't believe it. And she was just dying to get out of the place so that she could go home and tell her family that now she knows everything about it just from this one little session that we had.
This technique we're talking about, it's something we've talked about on the show before with Adam and Amy.
That's where I saw them doing it.
Yeah, we've talked about it with Carl Pfeiffer, who has talked about doing it at the Stanley Hotel. And it is the most fascinating thing to watch. And I haven't had the opportunity to try it with anyone. Like I said, most of the time I'm just, nerding out by myself with gadgets and things.
One of the things that I found, though, is that these 4 people are listening to the same spirit box session and are calling out different words. It's very rare that they all call out the same word at the same time, which you'd think they would if they're all listening to the same session.
It's like validating things immediately.
Yeah?
Yes, yeah.
One of my most profound things through the spirit box up at Q Station was this British voice saying to me, "They're not supposed to hear us." And another female responding, "Silence."
Shut up.
I know, right?
Oh, my gosh. Wow, that gives you chills.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're multiplying.
Now, what about this whole... I guess some people call it different things. There's like the Wonder Box and then the Spirit Box Enhancer.
Is this the portal?
Maybe it's the portal. I've heard people say different things. All I know is on Paranormal Lockdown, they use it a lot, and people are enhancing their spirit boxes and stuff. It has the really echoey, effect to it, and it kind of pulls back a lot of the radio chatter and really brings forward a lot of the stuff. That's what I want right now. I'm trying to get somebody to build me one of those because I'm totally fascinated by that.
Well, I've got one that I actually did get that's a mini, and it's a little amplifier. It has 2 guitar pedals. One basically is cutting out a certain amount of the of the spirit box, and supposedly just leaving the voices, and the other one gives it the bit of the echoey reverb, and they're guitar pedals. I haven't had a huge amount of success with it. There was one session we did with Appy at Berrima Courthouse where we had the one voice kept coming through the whole time and answering, and she was checking with it's called Trove, where we have all the newspaper articles which have been scanned and put in. She had the story of this person that was murdered, and all the information that was coming through the portal was matching historical documents that she had just pulled up, not something she'd researched. We'd got a name through the portal. She found that name in regard to Berrima Courthouse, and then we're asking questions based on the story she had. So that was my biggest success with the portal, but I haven't had a huge amount. I'd like to try some of the other portals, but they're so expensive.
Yeah.
I've got to save my shekels.
Yeah. That's why I don't. I mean, I've got to be careful. There for a while, I was buying a lot of those gadgets, and when you're a podcast nerd too, there's podcast gadgets, and you can't get all the gadgets you want. And I'm also not a builder. I don't build things. I'm not, cool enough to do that. Everybody's like, well, you can build one yourself. And I'm like, you are putting way too much faith in me being able to build a simple motor. Okay. So that's not happening. Renata, do you get as the psychic, do you get into any of the tools, or do you not need them?
I like to give people who believe that they're sensitive the other side of the coin when it comes to investigations and tours. So that's why we work well together, because Anne has all the tools and everybody loves the tools. Everybody loves the gadgets.
No, they love me.
But the issue is, I'm ignoring that, but the issue is that once you start with the gadgets, all your psychic abilities tend to just shuffle off and go and sit in the corner and go, well, obviously you're not needing us, so we're not going to come through for you. So the idea is to open them up psychically first. So we give them a few exercises and things to do. And those that are more psychic or more sensitive enjoy that part. And those that are more gadget orientated will kind of bite their tongue through that, but they're really just chomping at the bit to get to the gadgets. So there are people there that kind of think, no, look, I'm never going to be sensitive. I'm never going to see, feel, or hear anything. Just give me a gadget so that a light can flash and tell me that there's a ghost there, while other people who are more sensitive really want to develop and tap into their psychic senses. And so I kind of work more with those people.
Well, you're offering them a balance, so that's nice.
Yes, well, that's what we hope we're doing. It doesn't work all the time. And, of course, you know what it's like dealing with the public.
Guarantee me a ghost every tour or I'm putting in a complaint and a 1-star review.
People have weird expectations of what is going to happen and what they can get for their dollar. And sometimes, well, often, we just can't fulfill their expectations, even if we turned ourselves inside out. We just couldn't. So, you know, there will always be that certain minority of people that will walk away going, oh, that was a load of crap, because it's not like the TV show that they just saw. We actually don't care about that. We're actually more centered on trying to dispel that as being the truth of the paranormal world, and actually telling people that sometimes you just don't get anything at all, and that's just the way it is.
And I know that there are listeners hearing you right now also concurring with that statement. You know, I love it.
And let's not even get started on orbs.
Oh, can we talk about orbs? Can we? Is there anyone that we can offend for you right now?
I was going to say orbs are like politics.
We've got to that stage that we go, oh, wow, that's really interesting. And then we crack up laughing later because it's our stock standard thing now. They either want the truth or they don't. And sometimes you can try to give them information, whether it's real or not real, and they're not going to listen anyway. So we just go, well, that's really interesting. Walk away.
I just think we have so gotten away from what the original idea of an orb was, as far as I understand, is that an orb was something that people saw with their eye.
Yes!
That's what it's supposed to be. And it just drives me nuts. And then you know, when we stop calling them orbs and we call them, gosh, what does Zach Bagans calls? They always call it a ball of energy.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay.
You can add rods to it as well. Have you heard of rods?
Yes.
They're alien.
Some of them look like pasta noodles.
Save me. Just save me right now.
I'm sure we are offending some people. Bring on the emails. Bring on the emails. Come on. People are sitting at home naming their orbs and...
Yeah. Oh, look, it really... the whole paranormal area is fascinating and it's wide. And the thing is that some people are at a particular level and other people are at another level. And we just have to be honest.
Orbs put me on the path. Yep. I have to say, orbs put me on the path. I took photos when I was on a tour at Q Station 10 years ago. Orbs everywhere. I made it into a video and put it online on YouTube. It's still out there, right? But the thing is, I wanted to know more. So I learned more. Some people will stay at that initial level of, wow, look at that. So it's whether you want to learn more or if you're happy where you're at. So good luck to everyone.
That's cool. Yep.
For the most part, I think this community is good about being open in your thinking.
Yeah.
And not being, well, I don't know if everybody's so quick to not judge, but I think maybe...
read people, which I get judged.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely a stigma of that around here, too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the moment we mention that word, everyone's hair stands on end.
The rosary beads come out. No holy water on you, and don't mention 12-year-old boys.
And don't you throw salt sometimes, Anne? You have some salt that you throw at things.
Yes,
I've got my bag.
Ladies, you guys are so fun. And I think we should Skype each other just for fun, even not on the podcast, like once a week, and just,
Excellent.
talk and everything. Let's schedule that. But I do want to give you the opportunity to kind of give any final thoughts that you have from the evening. And then once again, well, you might want to talk about any future events, if you want to, but whether people are in Australia or US or the UK or wherever they are, tell us where we can find you and bug you and find more out about you.
Okay. All right. Well, Patrick, just letting everyone know out there that we are available for book signings, toilet signings, the opening of an envelope, anything that requires anyone just to talk crazily for about 15 to 20 minutes. We're there.
Yeah, I could go longer than 15 minutes.
Yeah, so,
I've got stamina.
If anyone has a place to fill a gap, just give us a call and we shall be there.
The opening of a Walmart or a Starbucks.
Oh, anywhere.
Oh, Starbucks would be good. We like coffee.
Yeah, that's all cool. Other than that, you can find me at newcastleghosttours.com.au for any of our Newcastle tours. We have another Facebook page called the Seance Parlor, and there is information there about seances and historical stuff and about some of the stuff that we do and the things that we have encountered during our seance sessions. And, of course, the Paranormal Party podcast. That is a live podcast every Sunday at 7:00. And as we spoke briefly before, it takes us all of about 2 minutes to get organised before the podcast. So when we say we are live, we are beyond live. We are as live as we are going to get.
We have a pulse.
And so to get that podcast or vodcast, people have to be connected with you on Facebook, right?
Yeah,
that is correct.
Live on Facebook.
Okay.
So friend us on Facebook, the Paranormal Party podcast.
I love the rolled R. That's nice.
Thank you.
And Anne, where they can find you? Where can they find you, my love?
We are Oz Paratech. Find us on Facebook. It's just 3 different words: OZ space PARA space TECH. Now, hang on, you say H differently, don't you?
We do. H.
H. I've got to remember that. And your Z's as well instead of Z. No, your Z.
Z.
OZ. Yeah, I lived in Los Angeles for 2 months, so I sort of got the hang of it. So you can find us there. Also, as Renata said, the Seance Parlor. We are the Seance Sisters. And also our webpage is ozparatech.com. Anyone in Australia who wants to come and hang out with us, we've got a weekend coming up at Wallachia, spelt with a W, not an F. And that... be good. He'll catch on eventually what that was. So Wallachia Development Centre, 13th to the 15th of July, and we're having a weekend of paranormal stuff. So we've got Beth Darlington from Access Paranormal, Roman, my husband, and myself doing different talks on gadgets and hands-on and all that sort of stuff, and Renata's doing stuff on protection, and we're having a seance for the average Joe, as we like to call it, on the Saturday night, which is teaching people about the table tipping and glass dowsing and Ouija boards for those who dare. We won't force anyone to do anything they're not comfortable with. We always make that a priority. So I think that's probably about it for me.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for letting me share some of your energy this evening and nerdiness. And you guys rock. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Patrick. You have the best podcast anywhere in the universe, and we love it.
That's because we're on it.
And we have to thank our beautiful Susan for getting us.
Thanks, Susan.
Connecting us. We will always be forever grateful. But yeah, your guests and the way you handle your podcast is totally professional and wonderful, and we appreciate greatly the work that you do. So keep going.
What she said.
Keep going. Don't give up. We'll have to come over there and hunt you down and kill you.
Hang on, we need your code word for EVP before we kill you.
Yeah, there you go.
We can get you through the cable.
That is funny. And what a perfect ending to an episode. We'll kill you. See, you don't know, but I'm going to cut it right there. Yay! Thank you to the following super paranerds who support the show at patreon.com/Big Seance. Susan Davey, Amy Park Gedicke, Josiel Lorenzo, David Rubenstein, Jim Budd, Kim Robb, Bianca Roth, and Dylan McNamara. My Parlor guests, who can be found at bigseance.com/Parlor guests, are Anna Frias, Lana Carbon, and John Lilies of Carbon Lilies at carbonlilies.com. My parentals, Norman and Linda Keller, Karen Prine, and Denise Sia of Mystic Moms Paranormal. Thank you again, friends. Stay tuned for some silly outtakes and the Paranerd Hashtag. For show notes, including links to anything we may have mentioned in this episode, visit bigseance.com. You can find and subscribe to the show in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play Music, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and just about anywhere podcasts are found. Do you have any comments or feedback? Go to bigseance.com/feedback to learn how to get your voice in a future show. Or you can call my feedback line, 7755-TELL-ME. That's 775-583-5563. Interested in learning how to promote and share the podcast? Go to bigseance.com/share. Thank you so much for listening. Unfortunately, it's time to blow the candles out, but we'll see you and light them again next time. Renata, this is you and all of your things. So, but you guys are, I mean, clearly you guys are this force together. And so I don't know how you are a force. You are a force.
Force. We go to the gym together, for heaven's sake.
Wow.
I know, right? You should see it. We're both in Lycra. It's fantastic.
I am not doing enough of that, let me tell you.
Oh, God. All right. We're serious. We're serious.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
I'd sort of talked about it, but Renata is the one who put it into action, so you can tell them all about it. I've got a sore eye. I can't talk.
I've got a sore knee and I can't talk. How about that?
Your Paranerd hashtag for today is Paranormal Party, all one word. So tag me at Big Seance, tag Renata at Spookylicious, and that's exactly how you'd expect it to be spelled, and tag Anne at Anne RZE, and that's Anne with an E, at Anne RZE, and use the hashtag Paranormal Party. That's some big Paranerd homework today, but you know, sometimes you have to work hard to prove you're a big Paranerd. Peace out.